to The Plain Truth, the show where we go into some of the mysteries, anomalies, and the dirty underbelly of the world around us. I'm your host, Paul, and joining us this week, we have Lada Ray, who is well known for her discussions of the Great Earth Shift, as well as various interesting topics on a geopolitical level, such as events in Europe and Asia, and lots of other things, too. Lada, are you there?
Hello. Good to talk to you, Paul.
Yeah,
it's been a while.
It's been a while. Well, hope things are well. I'm just doing some more traveling, enjoying the summer and all that kind of thing, and hope you can say the same.
Yes, it's going well so far.
So far, good. Well, since we've talked last, a lot of things have happened, right? The world seems to be, dare I say it, shifting. Mm-hmm. And so I thought it'd be a good time to catch up and see how you're seeing some of the changes going on and so on. And so let's get into a couple of topics. Of course, we're overwhelmed these days, but at a high level, where do you see things going, let's say, with Europe? Mm-hmm. How does that how do you see things going? I mean, we had Macron win in France, we have Trump and Merkel. What do you think is going on in Europe? How would you read Europe these days?
We're talking Western Europe, am I correct? Or we're talking all of Europe?
How about all of Europe, but leave Russia as a separate space?
Okay. Well, let's divide up Western Europe versus Central and Eastern Europe. Those are completely different situations. So we'll start with Western Europe. As you know, there are events in England, in the UK, I should say, the new elections, and Theresa May basically lost. It is not quite a loss. They still won a very, very slim majority, but it's not sufficient to form a government. So there is turmoil there. In France, we had not quite a near win, but a very, very close second, a very impressive showing by Marine Le Pen, yet Macron won. Now, in Germany, we have elections that are coming up for to re-elect or elect new chancellor, and that will be this fall or this autumn. And my prediction that I already made for some of my listeners and some of my readers for Earthshift reports and for the Earthshift webinars, I already predicted, and I'm going to reiterate it for your listeners, Paul, that I do not see Merkel winning this time. This is a very big deal, in fact, but somehow elections in Germany are always so matter of fact that I always forget to make a specific prediction. So I'm going to use this chance to predict right here and now that Merkel is going to lose this election. Well, as you know, I oftentimes predict elections, but it's getting more and more complicated going forward because I feel like certain forces, I mentioned that previously in my Earthshift Report 18 on Macron versus Le Pen in France, and I said that it's getting more and more complicated, and certain forces, I feel like somebody is listening somewhere in the background and is trying to tweak things if say I predict or say something too early. But I think nevertheless that Merkel is spent material. She actually has to go there. She's too tiring. People are too tired of her and her ways of doing things. Although she is game, she wants to be reelected again. So this is basically more or less the picture for the major countries in Europe, in Western Europe right now. Of course, there are countries in Europe that are not as prominent perhaps, but still that are making waves this way or that way. And I just wanted to mention that it seems like there's no rhyme or reason if you glance at it from, with the layman's eyes. A leftist almost won in the UK. Conservatives, yes, they hung on to power just barely and not quite. They will have turmoil and division in society that is very visible. In France, the right-wing candidate, what is considered extreme right-wing, Marine Le Pen, was really, really prominent. Yes, seemingly, I'm underlying this, Macron, who seemingly is a centrist, but not quite, won this election. Now, in Germany, the person who will come after Merkel will probably be quite similar to Merkel. It's not going to be a huge breakthrough, but it's going to be a marginal improvement. Yet societies let me just finish this thought, Paul, and then I'm all yours. Societies in each of these countries, as well as some other countries of Europe, such as the Netherlands, for example, they're very divided. Well, but those who don't see a common thread, I see this common thread. What is happening in various countries of Europe and elsewhere around the world is what I term the Great Earth Shift. The Great Earth Shift means that everything is shifting. All the ideas are shifting. Consciousness is shifting. The ways we view ourselves, our society, and everything in it, politics, geopolitics, everything is shifting. And as you also know, those who follow me know this as well, part of my Earth Shift theory is the fact that the great balancer, Russia is the great balancer, rebalances now the world. Of course, Russia doesn't do it alone. And there are all kinds of forces, both in the West and in the East, including large countries such as China, for example, that are participating in this huge endeavor of rebalancing the world away from the overly yang West, this aggression, Western aggression that took over so much in our world. It was allowed to take over too much, to a more balanced state. And this is what we're seeing. Your shift is characteristical. That's one of the main characteristics of my theory, the Earth Shift theory, is that society is very divided. It is divided in every country, turmoils everywhere, protests everywhere, up to, in certain countries, it goes as far as fascism and terrorism and extremism that proliferates. Certain countries even fall between the cracks and they start disintegrating. And this process will be continuing. So Western Europe is basically in the beginnings of this process, but Western Europe has to continue going in this direction because it has to shed some of its power, give up some of its power, some of its assets, some of its, let's just say, excess well-being. And the same is true for the US. And we are seeing it very, very clearly in the US with Trump's win, which was basically 50-50. Hillary and Trump were 50-50, neck to neck. And people still argue who really won this election. And this division, this bifurcation of the elites in European countries, in the US, is very, very visible. So that's where we stand right now with Western Europe. Yes, you wanted to ask me.
Well, I assume that your calibration for May, Macron, and Merkel, I assume that the calibration's not too high. Is that a safe bet?
No, probably not, but I'll be honest with you, I never calibrated them, but I can do it right now for you and your listeners. Sure. Okay,
Please.
Let's start. Good. Let's start with Merkel. Merkel, actually, I calibrated Merkel for my YouTube channel. She was part of my original videos on quantum calibrations that are posted on Lada YouTube channel. If anybody is interested, the whole scale is there. Okay. So the whole scale of quantum calibrations, there are 2 videos, and they explain everything. Merkel was one of the examples of the level of pride. So let's see what she calibrates at right now, Merkel. I usually calibrate first QC, which is quantum calibration, which is the heavenly energy that is available to a subject, whether it's a person, an object, or if it's a geo-calibration, it could be a country, a city, a village, a place. And then I calibrate the chi level, which is the energy, manifestation of the earthly energy in this dimension, in this existence. So I usually calibrate those 2. I also can calibrate the heart chakra. Heart chakra is very telling. It actually tells you where the person's heart is, literally, how much you can trust that person. There are many other calibrations, but these three are very, very telling. So let me calibrate Merkel. So her quantum calibration, Merkel right now is 100. It actually went down dramatically. For my videos, which I did a couple of years ago for my YouTube channel, she was calibrating at 180, which is the level of pride, which is a typical level for Western politicians up until recently. But they all have been going down in calibration dramatically. Pride is below the minimum positive level of 200. And it is basically, I so want to survive and hang on to my nice house, my nice car, my nice assets, that I will not start any wars or arguments with anybody for that specific reason, not because I really am for peace. So this is living up to the Joneses, or this is displaying proudly somebody's luxury car or luxury house, and me, but also seeing others and not wanting to go to war with others only because I don't want to be disturbed, not because I'm so wonderful or compassionate or nice human being. Well, that was the level of so many Western politicians until recently. And lately, they're feeling the heat. And so their calibrations are actually going down. And you see this with Merkel, 100 is fear. She actually is fearing what's going to happen to her. And that actually reminds us of what we just discussed 5 minutes ago, that my prediction is that she will lose this election. She apparently is seeing it already. And her chi level right now is 180. She retains the same chi level as before, which is pride. Okay? But her calibration, heavenly energy available to her, has diminished. It's stifled her to 100. Okay, that's Merkel. Now let's do, who are we doing? Theresa May. Theresa May is, her calibration is 180, very typical of politicians in the West, pride. And her chi is 185. 185 is still also pride. So she is very typical still. At this point, she did not lose her calibration, as far as I understand. Just barely 2 months ago, she was calibrating at 185. She was on 85. So she actually lost 5 points in her calibration, which is not bad, considering that she's in a tight spot right now. Let me calibrate her opponent. What is his name?
Jeremy Corbyn.
Corbyn, that's right. Thank you. And he's very interesting. I actually like him in so many ways. I don't know as much about him as because I was busy with other topics that I was looking into in the past couple of months. So much to do, so much going on. But he's very interesting. I might look into him a little further. But let me calibrate him out of curiosity. His calibration presently is 200. That is the minimum positive calibration. This is very rare for Western politicians. Usually that indicates that he is trustworthy enough. This is the level of courage. It is confrontational courage. I distinguish between high courage, which is above 225, 230, and courage that is confrontational, which is below that. So he's, that's good. That's very good. And his chi level is 280. 280 is very high for a Western politician. And that's the level of friendliness and neutrality. And just look at him, how he behaves. He really does display that behavior. So he manifests the chi, the energy of friendliness and neutrality. Well, I'll tell you something. He would be a much better head of state for the UK, and I really do hope he gets to that level than Theresa May and then her party. And he really is trying to reform Labour. So wishing him the best of luck.
Well, he seems almost human to me, so that makes him stand out.
Yeah. And we have Macron. Macron is, I calibrated him for Earthshift Report 18. I forget what I came up with back then, but he was riding high. I believe he was also strictly 180, 185 for all dimensions. And Le Pen was a lot higher, which was very unusual, strikingly unusual. And this is why, unfortunately, she could not be elected because she was too highly calibrated for that environment in which the election in the West is happening. So Macron presently is 180, 185, same calibration as before. He might have lost like a couple of points since then. And, you know, Macron, of course, represents not just the establishment. He represents the Rothschilds. He represents the typical, that old style NWO. The banksters, those who want to hang on to power, they were so close to global dominance. They were so incredibly close. And there comes Russia, the great balancer, as well as Le Pen locally, and disrupt everything that they were building so nicely. Of course, the main culprit from their perspective is Russia. Russia did everything. So Macron is he's the front man. He is replacing Merkel as and as well as other forces such as UK is going away, so they don't have the proper representative for that old NWO there because UK is trying to leave the EU. Now, Trump is, of course, at loggerheads with globalists in so many ways, although he's succumbing to that. And so Macron is their new poster boy. He is their new golden boy. They groomed him for that position. They are really so hoping he will latch onto power and lead them again out of this corner that they painted themselves into.
Now, didn't he meet Putin recently?
Yes, that was also very interesting. He met with Putin in a very specific setting, which was full of signals. And I will also compare it very briefly lately, how he talked to Trump. There was such a strange juxtaposition of the two meetings, so to speak. So with Putin, the way he met, there was this red carpet laid out, big, beautiful and full guard, orchestra, and they had conversations, and their joint interview, joint Q&A was happening at Versailles. Versailles is also where they met. So it was a meeting, which was a mere state visit, that was put together very quickly. It happened very quickly after Macron was elected, so there wasn't that much time to invite anybody with ceremony. But Putin was met in a style befitted of kings. In Versailles, with red carpet, with that full guard and all these bells and whistles. And also Putin denied the visit to France previously when the previous president, the outgoing Hollande, was still in power. Hollande was sending some strange signals, and Putin said, okay, if you're not sure, I'm actually not going to come and see you. And so this visit was actually postponed. So Macron had to kind of go in and step in and say, well, no sour grapes, even though Russians hacked me and hacked my election, which incidentally was recently proven by the French security services that it never happened. So it was hearsay, in fact. But that's the line on which Macron ran. Then he meets Putin with this big pomp, and Putin also had one of his planned stops was to visit the new Russian cathedral, which was built in a very beautiful spot on the bank of the river Seine. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I'm used to the Russian pronunciation, and we say it in Russian Sena. English, I hope, well, correct me if you like.
I think it's the Seine.
Seine, okay, the Seine. Thank you. Believe it or not, I never pronounced it in English before. The River Seine. That cathedral is also very symbolic because it's a very beautiful cathedral. It has been designed by French architects. It's really state of the art. It's in a spot that is visible from many vantage points in Paris, and you actually see it from roads, you see it from the other side of the river, you see it from boats, etc., etc. So it was treated as a big event, the opening of that Russian cathedral. Putin was supposed to come and he was supposed to open the cathedral, but since he didn't come to see Hollande, he already came in after the cathedral was open. And in France, they give a lot of credence to all these signals. Who does what, who comes to see us. So Macron needed to send a signal, number one, that he actually welcomes Russia and he takes over from other European leaders as the lead negotiator with Russia, that he will be the one taking over. That's why so much pomp. That's why so many signals, Versailles, red carpet, and this and that. But at the same time, he needed to send a signal that he's not afraid of big, bad, mean, big Putin and big Russia, that he will be tough to them. That's why he started mentioning things such as Russia interfered in our elections, and there were disruptions, and RT is not real journalism, Russia Today, as well as Sputnik. That's why we denied them accreditation into our offices when we ran Macron's campaign offices. All this had to be said. He was told to say that he's a full-fledged project for his masters, who basically brought him in, who morphed him into this persona that he is right now. I'm not saying this is not close to his personality. I think it matches his personality very well. And he's also very young. He is only 39, which also gives him an advantage, which is what I predicted back in Earthshift Report 18, when I said that there is a big advantage if you are a young man in this period 8. So he was elected because he has these kinds of sponsors who didn't mind throwing billions to basically morph him and mold him in this persona, to organize votes, to organize the PR campaign, and to present them in the best possible way. And that's why he won. So now we have to watch and see how much he can do. His job is actually to try to focus Europe in such a way, try to steer Europe in such a way as to prevent the last remnants of NWO and globalism from disintegrating. He wants to keep that neoliberal system in Europe well-oiled and functioning for as long as possible, either until they come up with Plan B and can reverse it. They think they can reverse it. Of course, they cannot. The earth shift and keep the dominance of the West present, or until they can transfer all of their assets and somehow morph into something else. So that's his job right now.
Okay. So how about with Russia? I mean, aren't we coming up on the 100th anniversary of the revolution? What do you see going on there? Are the events in Russia now, is that symbolism important in Russia, and are the anti-Russian forces using that?
Yes, I believe so. The 1917 Bolshevik Revolution, actually the revolution in 1917 had two parts. The very first part began in February of 1917, and very few people remember it and very few people mention it, even if they know that it occurred. And the first revolution, the so-called February Revolution, was actually a bourgeois revolution. It was anti-Tsar, but a big capital revolution. If you can believe that that's actually possible. They wanted Tsar out, but who wanted him out were the big capitalists, big owners of big factories, big bankers, as well as a lot of nobles, including those who were very close to Tsar, including his cousins. And his, not his brother, but his cousins definitely were in on it. They were all parading around with red bands and telling everybody that they were revolutionaries and they wanted a Russian monarchy to be abolished. They wanted the republic.
Why do you
why?
think they want? Mm-hmm.
Why? It's a very, well, collective madness like we have now in Ukraine, I guess. Well, basically, the multidimensional explanation from the Earthshift theory perspective is simply that Russia, the great balancer, was having so much trouble keeping the world in balance because the Western aggression was taking on these like new dimensions, and Russia was having too much trouble keeping the world balanced at that time. Russia started breaking. Russia simply started breaking. You know, it's a very hard job to balance between yin and yang, east and west at all times. And again, I want to direct everybody to my website, lada.com, where you can find free articles, free material on my Earthshift system. Go into that tab. You will see links to what Russia, the Great Balancer is. And of course, my latest webinar, Inverted Collapse Talks, it gives you a very nice, very significant primer on how the Earthshift theory works, how the Great Balancer theory works, and the yin-yang 3D world, how all that works. So I'm inviting everybody to check out on lada.com and on Futurist Trendcast, also my blog. You will see links to all that.
Hey, Lada, before we go on, I'm intrigued by this title, Inverted Collapse. So what do you mean inverted? What does that mean? What's going on here?
You know, at first I called it, that was my working title for probably 2 years. I called it the mirrored collapse. Okay. The mirrored collapse. And when you look in the mirror, you see yourself there, except left is right and right is left. You know, you have your right and left are juxtaposed.
Switched.
Right? And I liked it, except I thought that it was not intense enough, perhaps not like in your face enough, maybe, or mirrored collapse. A lot of people may not get it. And I was thinking about it, and inverted collapse occurred to me on several occasions. And then one of my followers actually suggested it. And I was thinking, yeah, that's a great word. I actually liked it myself. And what I'm talking about when I talk about inverted collapse, many people actually read a great book by Dmitry Orlov, Reinventing Collapse. That was mid-2000s. Paul, I believe you even interviewed him, right?
Yes,
At one point.
Yes, he's very good.
Yeah, he's very good. I remember reading it myself. It probably was around 2005. And at the time, incidentally, he has a very similar background to mine. His family and himself, they left Russia, I believe, either late 80s or early 90s, around the same time as I did. He found, I believe he also went to school here. I did not go to school here, found a lucrative job, did pretty well in the US, lived in Boston, basically in the Northeast, just, we both are Northeasterners, so to speak, here. And we have a lot of similar background this way. I believe he's from Moscow also, although I also lived in Odessa as well. A lot of similarities. And at some point, we both apparently started questioning, sooner or later, questioning what was happening in the US, how all this was related, what was happening with the collapse of the USSR. And he went ahead and wrote that book, and he did a great job. That book awoke so many people, except later when I started getting into geopolitics. For me, it happened later because I didn't want to get into geopolitics for a long time, simply because I so despise confrontation of any sort, even perceived confrontation. But the events in Ukraine in 2013-14 just made me like go full force into that, because I really needed to tell people the real story, the real truth of what was happening, because lies were everywhere about what was happening in Ukraine. And the rest is history. I started writing Futurist Trendcast, and Lada.com appeared, and an Earthshift report, and my Earthshift theory that I began developing earlier in 2012 started developing further, and now I intend to write more books. But going back to Reinvented Collapse, I started questioning a lot of things that him and other gurus and other specialists and perceived specialists tell us about what happened and what is happening and when the West will collapse and how it will collapse. Do you remember all these stories? By now, we should have collapsed, right? Everywhere in the West. U.S. should have collapsed. The dollar should have collapsed. The gold and silver should have been through the roof. Where is all that? Why did it not happen? And
good questions.
Yes. Well, all these questions are answered in Inverted Collapse and in the future webinars that are coming out soon. It's a trio of webinars: Inverted Collapse, then the future of money with my predictions, and the third one is specifically about my period 8 theory and the cycle of periods which are the Eastern, based on the Eastern cycles. And that's going to be the third webinar. It's going to be period 8 predictions by Lada Ray. Anybody interested, go to my ladaray.com site. Yes?
Okay, just a second. I can't let that go. Many of my listeners, that future of money sounds interesting. Can you just give us a taste of that? What's the future of money?
The future of money. We are going to be discussing the paper money, fiat currencies, and how I see it. Remember, all Western fiat currencies should have been collapsed by now, right? According to all the predictions from gurus and experts. Well, I see it differently. I want to explain what will happen with fiat currencies all over the world, including US dollar, euro, what will happen to yuan, what will happen to the ruble, and some other currencies. We might touch upon Australian and Canadian dollar, and my predictions for how everything will be performing going forward up until the end of period 8. That's going to be up until 2023. And what will happen after period 8 ends, which is the beginning of 2024, we're starting period 9. So I'm going to give you a glimpse of the beginning of period 9. Then we will discuss gold and silver, and generally precious metals, and why they have not gone through the roof up until now, and what I see going forward for the metals. I will also just give you a glimpse of real estate. It's not the future of money per se, but it could serve as basically a money converter or an investment of sorts. Also, we will talk digital and alternative cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin. We will probably focus mostly on Bitcoin and how I see it, what it really means multidimensionally. I will discuss everything from the third dimensional perspective, which is physical perspective, that the world that we primarily live in, but we are also stepping into 4D. We're in low 4D, like one of our feet as humanity is in 3D, another is lower 4D. And so cryptocurrencies, that's already 4D stuff. And I want to give predictions about that. And this is mainly what we will be discussing.
Oh, okay. By the way, Putin briefly talked to Vitalik, the man behind Ethereum, which is the number 2 cryptocurrency. I guess at the St. Petersburg conference. I'm not sure. But anyway, recently in the last week or so. So clearly that's another topic for the future. Okay, well, back to the general thing. So this is the 100th year. And from a high-level perspective, how do you see things in Russia? Where are things and where are they going?
we digressed into currencies and
Yeah,
webinars, and
well, but that's
and as
good. You want to promote webinars? I mean, let's talk. I
well, I
mean,
highly
things people
recommend
are
those.
interested in. Webinars, calibration. There's some things people are interested in. So,
Right.
hey, I got a dirty trick for you. Okay, how does Russia calibrate now versus say 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago?
Dirty
Has it
trick.
has it
Yes.
changed? Is
Let
it getting
me.
better? Is it?
Yeah, and it not better. No,
Oh,
depends on the year.
okay.
It's turmoil everywhere,
Yeah, sure.
confusion and turmoil everywhere. But Russia fares a lot better than Western countries. That I can tell you. Again, inverted collapse includes relative comparative calibrations
Hmm.
for several countries as well as EU for 3 periods. I calibrated Russia and USSR
Hmm.
at the time it was USSR in 1990, I believe, or 1991 when the USSR was collapsing, pre-collapse.
Hmm.
1990, I believe. Then I calibrated this year, 2017, and the year 2025. So it's progressive calibration as well. I calibrated the future as well. And countries that are included in that list of calibrated countries were USA, Russia, and USSR, EU, Germany, UK, and Canada, and I believe that's it. But I will eventually calibrate more. So anybody interested, again, go to inverted collapse webinar, ladare.com. That's where you get it. But let me calibrate Russia. As I said, Russia this year calibrates substantially higher than US or UK or Germany for that matter. But Russia does not calibrate the highest it has ever been. There were happier years in Russia in the past 2 decades than this year. It's a difficult time. There were attacks on the ruble, there are sanctions. Russia is trying to balance the past and the future. It's pre-election year. There are attacks are intensifying. They successfully, only partially, but successfully to a degree, created anti-Russia out of Ukraine. There are so many things happening. Okay, but still Russia calibrates above 200 with all that. So calibration for Russia in the year 2017, I'm doing the whole year, not just today, but the whole year. Quantum calibration is 210. That's, if you remember, it's above the minimum of 200. This is confrontational courage. From the geo-calibration perspective, in other words, calibration for countries and regions of the world, 210 means activity, not just courage, it's activity, and it's oftentimes it's expansion too. So there is expansion going on, although there are problems. Who doesn't have them, right? If we take USA today, that's just to give you an idea, USA in the year 2017 as a whole calibrated 180. That's pride for you. That's actually better than USA has been some other times. And if we take, you said 5 years ago, I can give you 5 years ago, that would be the year 2012. In 2012, Russia calibrated at 280. As I said before, Russia calibrated several years ago better. It was happier life. People were making more money. There was a huge, basically ruble lost 50% of its value ever since the attack on the ruble, sanctions, and Ukraine. So that happened since 2014. In 2012, Russians were pretty happy with life. So the country calibrated at 280. That's friendliness and neutrality. That is very rare for countries, very, very rare. There are only several countries in the world that usually or ever calibrate like that. China, incidentally, calibrates also pretty highly. And there are a few other countries. There could be, I haven't calibrated Switzerland lately, but in the past several years, when I calibrated Switzerland, that's another country that calibrated at that level. I think calibration even for Switzerland went down nowadays. Okay.
Well,
So
okay. So let's continue that. Thank you. Then let's continue. So Russia's been doing a great job installing their agent as president, right? So how do you see the whole Trump story that where he stands, and is there any connection at all with Russia of any sort? And how do you read all that? You must laugh, actually. I bet a lot of Russians laugh at that whole thing.
I'm laughing.
Well, I think it's serious. I mean, I I knew the KGB was good, but to actually get their own agent as president, that's impressive,
He's
boy.
not the only one. There are so many of them out there. Well,
They
Marine
got
Le
me.
Pen
I'm a
is,
nobody, but I mean, they got me. I'm an obvious agent. No, anyway, just going on. Okay.
yeah. As long as you actually do not believe their uh, lies, as long as you tell the truth, as long as you try to enlighten other people, right? As long as you try to correct the injustices, you are a Russian agent. I mean, let's be proud of that. That being honest, being truthful, not succumbing to the lies of that whole cabal and the deep state matrix, right? So globalist agenda, not being the sheeple. If that's what constitutes being the Kremlin agent, sure, no problem. Sign me up. Well, as far as how Russians feel about it, of course, they're very amused by this, extremely amused. But they say, sure, no problem. If you want to, if you want to think that Trump is our agent, go right ahead. Well, Russians hacked apparently German elections and French elections, and what other elections they didn't hack,
Canadian,
right?
I'm sure. But
Canadian, I don't know, I didn't hear about Canadian, but of course Ukrainian, then this Macedonian, some other, Montenegrin, which is Chernogoria. We call it Chernogoria, which is Black Mountain. Montenegro doesn't make any sense. And other elections, I'm sure there will be more accusations that Russians did this and that. Well, the UK is going crazy as usual. They calmed down a little lately, but they were going crazy too. That's nothing new there. Well, the long arm of Kremlin is everywhere, into everything. In reality, they're actually looking in the mirror. They're seeing their mirror image and saying, "Oh my gosh, that's not me. That's bad Kremlin. That's bad Russia." Looking from me from the mirror at me. In reality, they actually are portraying their own modus operandi, how they do things. They hack things. They listen to things. Remember all the NSA scandals? And now that they cannot hang on to power anymore, it's like slipping between their fingers. It's like sand. Oh my gosh, the sand is just escaping from me, right? Before they could hold on to it, and they cannot understand what's happening. How come we cannot hold on to this power that used to be ours for the asking, that people were eating out of our hands, and now look at this. So they have to invent external enemies. In reality, Trump, of course, is not a Russian agent, but Trump, he entered the campaign knowing full well that this is what sold amongst those people that were his constituents. And that's why so many people liked him and voted for him, because in reality, Americans, I'll give it to Americans, many Americans are waking up sufficiently knowing that they've been fed lies, that they've been lied to and swindled for many, many years. They don't want this agenda anymore. They don't want their country to be used as this point man for NWO, for whatever it is that is happening out there, whatever substitute we might want to find for it, like deep state, dark state. I call it dark state. They don't want it anymore. So what are they to do? They voted Trump because he was the only one available who was capable of winning the election, and who was out there, who was willing to take that job on. Nobody else was capable of winning election. Running against all that establishment. The thing is that Trump, though, he honestly thought that he could come in and he could mend relations with Russia. He could show what a big winner he is compared to the wuss that was Obama, the loser Obama, right? And he thought that he could do that. Now, an interesting thing that how Russians really did hack election, and I'm putting a big quote unquote here, was there was one moment when back in, I believe, 2016, even, it was like a year before elections, Putin once said that when asked who he would prefer as president, he said, I like Trump, but he corrected himself immediately by saying, but this is up to the American people. We don't interfere in your elections. And that put such a wind into the sails of Trump. It actually created such a momentum for the forces. Oh, Putin supports us. So those forces that wanted to implicate Trump and mire him in scandals and put him in that straitjacket I always talked about, these forces just took that one phrase and created a whole humongous big elephant out of this little tiny mouse. Okay, they created that, and they will keep blowing and blowing hot air into this humongous balloon, making it bigger and bigger for as long as Trump is in office. You remember, Paul, we discussed it when you interviewed me for webinar 1 on Trump. Is Trump will Trump survive his first term? We discussed it. I called it the straitjacket. They put Trump in a straitjacket. I predicted that. That was at the beginning of February, and Trump's term just started in the White House at that point. We were literally 1 week into his term when we recorded that interview. And what is happening? Exactly what I said, that he is in that straitjacket. He's in that narrow channel that they put him into, and he cannot really move left or right, backwards or forwards. He is forced to run in that very, very narrow channel. So he cannot do what he wanted to do, mend relations with Russia. He will try. It's not that he will not try, but I predicted back then in that Trump webinar that it's not going to be that much of a difference. It's not going to. I'm sorry, that was previous. That was Earthshift Report 16, I believe we did, not Trump webinar. I'm thinking another thing,
Mixing
but
them. It's okay.
Yes, but they were similar. I was predicting that stuff back then, and that's exactly how it happened. Frankly, I don't envy Trump. I think that it's going to be a horribly difficult presidency, and it's going to be drudgery. He will be up against all these lawsuits, investigations, a lot of stuff coming at him, constant attempts at an impeachment, constant fights. And he's a fighter. This is what he thrives on. This is how he's done it all his life. He's also a deal maker, so he'll be trying to make deals. He'll be trying to give up certain things, which he is already doing. Again, per predictions from previous webinar and Earthshift Report, he'll continue doing that. But as I previously said and predicted, I hardly see him in the White House, which is basically his family is refusing to move to the White House, right? His wife and child are not even there. He's hardly there. But also what happens is that he may, there is a percentage of possibility there that he might be impeached before the end of his term, or they might let him to finish his term so that not to escalate the situation even further. I do not see him under no circumstance as I see him for the second term. He will not go for the second term. He will not be elected for the second term, no matter what happens, whether there will be impeachment or not. The danger is pretty serious that he might be impeached after 2-3 years in office. Not right now. Right now, it's not going to happen. After 2-3 years in office, no matter what he does, they will try to derail things unless he does what they want him to do. And that would be what he did in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, and in Qatar, incidentally, as well. That they want him to do. He has to go to Saudi Arabia and, excuse my French, kiss ass, and get that humongous commitment from the Saudis to buy arms from the US for $110 billion. Only 12 billion of that are confirmed. The rest is, oh, maybe we'll buy this from you. But this is something that delays the day of reckoning for Trump. It actually buys them time. And this is actually a bribe to the military industrial complex, if you will. Oh, look, I brought you these huge contracts. You've got to like me. You cannot go after me. Other forces that are supporting that same complex, they will be saying, well, maybe he is after our guy after all. Remember, after he started bombing Syria, he bombed once or twice, they suddenly said, oh, finally, he's becoming our president. And there is a wide understanding amongst people who are in the know that he actually had to show something to these circles that are trying to kill him in the crib, so to speak, kill his presidency in the crib. That look, I'm just like you. I can bomb Syrian army. It's like a bribe. Here, take more. Here, stop growling at me, you bad dog. Basically, with deep state being the bad dog. Here is another bribe for you. Here's another one, and he will be forced to do this bribing of the establishment of the deep state, of neolibs, neocons, all these forces. He will be forced to do that all the time. Concessions. He may even think that he is making deals, but in fact, they are putting him very successfully in a straitjacket and keeping him there. And all these lawsuits, all these calls to testify, or this Comey situation, what is happening with his son-in-law. And again, he is accused of relations with Russia. Well, because that's a terrible thing to have a conversation with the Russian ambassador, God forbid, because, you actually don't talk to an ambassador, right? He's supposed to be stonewalled. I mean, what is the ambassador's job? The ambassador's job is to make connections, to talk, to negotiate, right? He does it as a matter of course. That's his job description. So they're saying Russian ambassador is not supposed to meet with politicians and business people in the U.S., right?
Well, yeah, that's pretty absurd. But okay, so he's in a straitjacket, and his wiggle room is pretty limited, and so it's going to be a tough fight, and you don't see him getting reelected, which is a fair bet. He's also an old guy, and they're going to wear him down physically, one would think.
Yeah.
Even a young guy like Obama by the second term was looking 10 years older, so we can imagine that. Okay, so we can see that's going to be a challenge, and there are all these scandals that are being drummed up. So do you want to give any thoughts on who exactly? I mean, who is this cabal, this deep state, this dark state? Who do you think it is? I mean, I heard you say neoliberals and neocons, but that's kind of, I mean, aren't there like more concrete things behind the scenes? Would you say it's the City of London crowd, or do you think it's the military-industrial complex, or what do you think?
No, Paul, I have a different view of this, although in principle, those who talk about these things, we are all in agreement in principle, but the devil is in the details, and I have my own structure of what is happening.
Details, okay.
So, first of all, let's begin with the City of London. London, and generally some people believe that actually strings are being pulled from London. Actually, some other people think that they're being pulled from Israel. I can tell you that it's basically neither, although both Israel and the City of London, let's say, and the British Crown are participants in all that. I think they're basically partners. However, I would say that the point man, or the point state of what we should call the collective West, the Yang aggressive collective West, before World War II was the British Empire. However, the British Empire took a very big hit as a result of World War II, and it disintegrated basically gradually, but as a result of everything that was done, they lost a lot of their energy. So the And they were bombed. There was a lot of problems as a result of World War II. So the headquarters of what we should call NWO or the globalism, in other words, that umbrella that wanted to take over the world using the Western model, applying Western model to the entire world. We called it NWO until recently. Now, some people refer to it as sort of deep state, but I will get back to that. So that headquarters migrated to the US, New York, and between New York and Washington, let's just say, maybe a little bit California as well. And then, because the dollar became the global currency, et cetera, it grew, and grew into this big mushroom. That's where we are right now. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, as Gorbachev and Yeltsin were giving up everything, everything from assets to people to know-how, and especially all kinds of natural resources, the West actually was able to proliferate and grow into this humongous mushroom, yang, aggressive kind of mushroom that threatens to absorb the entire world, even more so. And as I said before, Russia is the great balancer. Russia's job, and that's why it has such a wide territory to balance itself between East and West, between Europe and Asia. Russia's job is to balance the world, the human world, and generally keep the world spinning and in balance. If it becomes too yang, that's very bad, that's too aggressive. If it becomes too yin, which is the global South and the global East, then it becomes too sluggish. Then it doesn't develop anymore. We need a balance of both so that there is a push for the future, which ideally the nice, good West is supposed to provide, okay? Whereas there is also stability and nurturing, which is the yin side of the world is supposed to provide. So Russia, the great balancer, is the only global power that is fully yin-yang. It is fully balanced between yin and yang. Unfortunately, Russia became severely imbalanced too as a result of the collapse of the Soviet Union. And the collapse of the Soviet Union was partially internal problems, and in big part, it was orchestrated from the West. So we have this situation where US becomes this single global superpower, and the headquarters of NWO and globalist movement facilitated by the West. And now all this is disintegrating. So we have remnants of NWO and globalism. And in my view, this is what should be called deep state. I actually like dark state better. That's my term for it. Deep state is Eisenhower's term, and he was referring primarily to the hidden forces that were pulling the strings in the US and were not letting him do his job at his time. And it was military-industrial complex, different interests that were in the shadows, but it was big capital, it was financial circles, bankers, but at his time, it was also military-industrial complex in the biggest part. Now we have financial capital. We have what is on the surface. Again, what we call today neoliberals, neocons. These are visible forces. They're of course invisible forces to the naked eye. They're hiding really well, and they're usually in the finance world, like Rothschilds, Rockefellers, that sort of thing. Also, Europe. The traditional politicians of Europe, such as Merkel and Macron and Theresa May and the British Crown, those are participants in that. Heads of state and politicians in countries of the Anglo-American spectrum, such as Canada, Australia, they are very much into that. They're in it full force. But there are also politicians, due to the fact that they received education in the US primarily, some in the UK, that are in Eastern Europe, that are also in this. Well, we have politicians like that in Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, in Poland, in many countries of the Balkans, in Bulgaria, in Slovakia partially in Czechia, not all of them, in Hungary to a degree as well. Soros influence is very big there, and Soros is a big part of this, again, what is called deep state, and I call it dark state. So these are the remnants of NWO that are trying to save themselves. That's my definition and my vision of how it works.
Okay, sounds clear. It's hard to put it all together, and it's even hard to know what the motives are of different players, because the politicians seem very shallow, but you got to think that behind the scenes there are some very, very serious people who are absolutely totally driven by power, and you just wonder. But why don't we move on a little bit? We've been focusing on Europe a lot. And I think that to do a little bit of justice to the high-level approach today, we should say, what do you think's going on in Asia, particularly, let's say, East Asia? China, we've got all these things that you have to look at it and say, I wonder. North Korea, South China Sea, Japan. What do you see there?
Everything is all over the place. Everything is confusing, and a lot of people are confused. I actually get a lot of questions daily, sometimes hourly, from various followers and readers and listeners to my webinars and Futures Trendcast. And they all are trying to figure out what's happening with their country, with their region of the world, or what to expect going forward. What is the best place to live in the world? Incidentally, I like to answer readers and listener questions, and we will be doing webinars. Again, go to my lada.com and Futures Trendcast to find out more when I will be doing free Q&A webinars in the future. So it's country by country, really, and different situations call for different interpretations. I will just say right away that all this confusion, everything that is going on, changes practically everywhere in the world, sometimes subtle when the country is more stable or under control sufficiently, and sometimes very explosive either changes or revolutions or insurgencies or terrorism taking over is when the country is weaker. All this works basically and reflects period 8. What we're seeing now, and this is a period of young men, period when terrorism, proliferation, and expansion of the military, saber rattling, more military expenses, more stuff that is confrontational. All this is happening right now. You see how many terrorist attacks, whether they're false flag or for real, are happening around the world. The expansion and this resilience, I would say, of Islamist terrorism and ISIS. What is happening in, these constant terror acts in all kinds of countries, in all kinds of unlikely places, and military everywhere expanding. People are either lots of refugees. All these are period 8 situations that are very typical, but they're especially typical of the earth shift. Everything is shifting and people are getting confused. Populations of whole countries, like it's happening in Syria or Libya or Iraq and Afghanistan, are taking off. They're like unseated. They're torn out of their usual places and made into refugees by millions. This is crazy. This is big. This is all earth shift. But going back to Asia, I do not believe that there will ever be a war with North Korea because there are too many big players, including China, Russia, and Japan, as well as South Korea, of course, who will not allow that to happen. Okay, that's my prediction. There will not be any war with North Korea. However, North Korea is economically in a pretty bad situation, and different countries will have to somehow give something to North Korea to calm them down. Maybe certain supplies, maybe somehow help them out a little bit. And various countries are doing that. And they have no choice. They will have to be doing that. You cannot make a country, even a small country like that, into a pariah forever. So Trump's saber rattling is absolutely terribly wrong. And look how he lost that battle. He was saber rattling and telling everybody that he was going to war with North Korea. And look what happened in South Korea. Practically on the dot, a new president is elected in South Korea who says, no, this is not going to happen. We don't like this. We actually want to be friends and reunite with North Korea. And incidentally, USA, if you continue this saber rattling, we are going to boot out your bases. So somehow Trump actually made a boo-boo, and a very strange boo-boo here. He created animosity and resistance to himself where there wasn't that much resistance previously. There was some in South Korea. Clearly there was some. And South Koreans actually started rebelling against U.S. dominance. And U.S. is trying to preserve that dominance. But it didn't have to come to an ultimatum. We will actually boot out your bases. Same, incidentally, has happened in Turkey. Look how badly it went with Erdogan for the U.S. that was still under Obama, and Trump is trying to mend that situation. So U.S. is losing its touch, and the reason U.S. is losing its touch is because the power is dwindling, that Western globalism is dwindling. The world is being rebalanced. This is the great earth shift. It's rebalancing itself away from, some power is taken away from the West and goes to the East, but not all of it. So it's not going to be like a total shift back to the East and the West is left with nothing, like it happened during the last rebalancing, which was a big mistake when too much power was given to the West. Okay, this time we actually have a better balance. That's what Russia is trying to accomplish. Have this better balance between yin and yang and the East and West. But this is a big topic. I just don't want to go too deep into that. But China is doing its one way, one road plan, and that's the new Silk Road. It's going to be happening. The big, huge player in that is Russia, of course, as well as there are several of those roads, and one of them goes through Russia. That's a big one. Actually, two of them go through Russia. Then one goes through the Middle East and Turkey. These are land routes. And then there is also a route that is marine route and several others. Some of them go actually into India, but India is having a lot of trouble with deciding whether they want it or not. It's going to be great, but it will take a long time to somehow to organize all this. And the problem is that a lot of countries that are in huge turmoil are in the way. So the safest route by far is the Russian route. So that's probably going to be okay, but it will take years to get that done. Do you also want me to mention Japan, or?
Okay. Well, how about a quick overview of the region? Anything stand out with Japan, Vietnam, the Philippines? Anything on your radar?
As far as Japan goes, nothing extremely standing out at all. It's going in the right direction. Just like South Korea, Japan is slowly, very, very cautiously, is trying to decouple from the U.S., which is a healthy move for the U.S. They are very afraid to do it more drastically, although there are some nice strides that they're making in that direction too. Again, in the true great balancer fashion, Russia, of course, is right there. So the moment Japan starts decoupling just a tiny bit from the U.S., relations with Russia immediately improve. They start again talking trade with Russia and better relations, and maybe they will finally sign that peace treaty that they never signed since World War II, because who didn't let them? That was the U.S. that never let them sign the peace treaty. And the U.S. under Obama was still trying to sabotage meeting Putin and was telling him that no, you're not allowed to meet Putin. And Abbas said, excuse me, but I will do what I have to do for my country. And that was actually very good. Basically, yes, it's going in the right direction. There is a better trade, improved relations, although they're still rocky, but they're still improving between Russia and Japan, and that's very, very good. This really rebalances the region much better. And there is one more thing that is happening with Japan. I just remembered this has been on my radar. I've been kind of monitoring it since Fukushima took place. The problem with Fukushima, they still cannot control it. Of course, it's horrible for the oceans, horrible for the environment in general, and marine life, don't even get me started. It's horrible. But also, of course, it's not great for the people of Japan and for water quality and many, many other things. However, it has been known that since 2000, what year was that? I forget exactly, 2014, maybe earlier than that, Russians got involved in that, and they proposed participation and the development of new methods under which perhaps it can be controlled. So this cooperation between Japan and Russia in this nuclear sphere and the containment of Fukushima pollution is very productive. This is yet another reason, very big reason, why there has been a warming in relations between Russia and Japan. And it will continue. Russians are actually coming up with some solutions. They're not 100% that they are at the testing stage, but Russians are very good at nuclear stuff. And this is happening outside of any sort of influence by the US. And what is interesting, of course, we know that all the nuclear stations and all of those reactors were built by the US, by General Electric or Westinghouse, I don't remember, but one of those companies. And that was sold to Japan as that engine of growth, engine of industrialization that did exactly put Japan on the map in 1980s. But now Japan is paying this huge price for allowing so many nuclear stations to be built on the rim of fire. And what are they going to do? What can they do under the circumstances? It's a very, very serious situation. And let's just hope, I really hope to God that no more events like Fukushima will happen in the next, say, 10 years. Next 10 years are very dangerous up until about 2026. I will bring in astrology for 1 second. I know this is not the topic of this discussion, and some people may not even like astrology.
Oh, we're all ears. Come on, go for it.
This is so interesting and so telling. The thing is that up until the year 2026, we have Neptune in Pisces. What does this mean? Neptune is the planet that rules the following things. Pay attention. Water, anything to do with water, anything to do with liquids, and that includes, incidentally, oil and natural gas. It also rules energy that is invisible, ethereal energy, but it also rules all kinds of energy, including nuclear. So anything to do with nuclear energy is ruled by Neptune. When Neptune is in Pisces, it's like double whammy. It's very good for creativity. It's very good for spirituality, but it is also very good for confusion. And note how much confusion we see all over the world, right? It also is good for illusion, but also for the illusion being dispelled and truth coming out. But it is also, unfortunately, it proliferates certain things such as floods and spills of oil, as well as gas wars. Look at Gazprom wars with Ukraine, all this situation with Gazprom, pipelines being built or they don't want it built. All this falls under Neptune, this confusion and illusion that exists around gas pipelines. And the Fukushima leak is also under this influence. And we have this influence until 2026. So I'm really, really hoping that Japan has gotten its act together sufficiently that they will not allow this to happen anymore. And another thing, remember how Fukushima leak happened, at least that's the official story. It was the result of the tsunami. Again, we have water right there. Flooding, tsunami, and Fukushima. All this falls under the dominion of Pisces and Neptune. When you have Neptune and Pisces, it's multiplied tenfold. So everybody has to be very careful with water, with any sort of gas leaks in their homes, incidentally, with any sort of flooding. How many floods did we have around the world and continue having? And we will continue having them until 2026. So everybody has to be very careful. And of course, any sort of nuclear leaks, we have them all over the U.S. happening. Mm-hmm. We hear it in the news all the time. Nuclear station here has a leak or some kind of damage. Nuclear station there, maybe we should close it. Then we have a gas damage from fracking in Pennsylvania. I am in upstate New York right now. And of course, thank goodness, New York banned fracking. But Pennsylvania water table is completely poisoned in many areas in Pennsylvania, and people are drinking basically poisoned water, or they're forced to move out. And there is air problem in certain areas in Pennsylvania. We travel to or through Pennsylvania sometimes, and there are certain towns where there is an air problem. You actually breathe it, and then you cough for several hours after you left the town. So don't go there. There are certain, grim, certain areas in Pennsylvania, not all of them. So all this falls under this Neptune in Pisces dominion.
Well, that's kind of interesting. Okay, let's go to, I guess, the last thing I had, and then you can go into any topics you would like to. But the last thing that I know many people are curious about is Duterte in the Philippines. How do you see that playing out? Who is he? He's going to Moscow? What's going on?
He went to Moscow. He visited Putin just recently, talking about the non-existent isolation of Russia, as Obama liked to portray it, as Western Europeans like to portray it. Not only Russia is not isolated, everybody comes as like a pilgrimage to see Putin. Everybody from Saudis, Qataris, Erdogan and Merkel to Duterte, incidentally. So Duterte came to Moscow. It was a state visit, very simple, in fact. And while he was in Moscow, that ISIS situation in one of the provinces took place. He had to cut his visit short. So he had a conversation with Putin, which was, of course, on camera. And he said, well, I'm asking you for help, for military help. I need arms. I need contemporary arms. I tried to ask, basically, U.S. had to supply some arms last year to him, and they canceled contracts after he got into a fight with Obama. And now, of course, he already has showed himself as such an anti-U.S. agent, so to speak, that U.S. canceled all the contracts and doesn't want to reestablish them. So he was asking Putin for arms. Again, certain arms were supplied, I know that, but Putin was in a very difficult situation. Russia has certain guidelines, and in this situation, it was so quick, such a quick decision that Putin had to take. Who knows if all the population's rights are being absorbed there, how Duterte will be using those weapons. He is known as a tough guy, but overall, I think that he's actually the right man for the job. They really need somebody very tough. The Philippines is a very, very bad situation. And the Philippines, just like a lot of countries in Asia, is trying politically to decouple from the U.S.
So he's another Russian agent.
Well,
right?
yes, of course, of course. Who
Oh,
isn't nowadays, right? Anybody who is anybody is a Russian agent. Well, in Ukraine, not to be mentioned, not to mention the devil, right? Such as Ukraine. In Ukraine, all these politicians in Kiev who are pro. Nazi, pro junta, pro Poroshenko, they fight each other all the time like spiders in a jar. Do you know what they call each other? Uh, they call each other, you are Putin's agent. No, you are Kremlin's agent. This one is Putin's agent. Even if he's totally anti-Russian and stuff, they all are Putin's and Kremlin's agents. You know, this is the new boogeyman. Somebody has to be, right? This is
well, it
an old
sounds like this could
boogeyman.
turn into a religion or something. This is pretty weird to me. But anyway, okay, so I
No,
guess that's
Duterte is not bad. My overall feel for him, he is not bad. He's a very tough guy. He does have a very tough situation. This ISIS investment in his country, very suspect though, very suspect how they suddenly were able to gain so much traction. And I really suspect there is Western influence here, and we're not going to say who, although everybody knows who that is. Who does all these things? Who does color revolutions all over the world? Who does interferences in other countries' affairs? They sense weakness and they go in. So apparently that specific province is where that weakness was in the Philippines. And what did Duterte do in 2016? He broke up officially, although he cannot do it 100%, he's still very dependent on the US because of how many tentacles there are in his country. But he tries to politically and PR-wise to break up with the US. He said it very loudly. He did it for everybody to hear. He called Obama some name, not a very nice one. And he continues saying that USA is trying to stifle his country, that sucking the juices out of it, that it's a neocolonialism, etc., etc. He's right. He's not wrong there. The problem is that requires for him to pay the price for what he did and what he said. And once the cogs are set in motion, and they were set in motion immediately, it took them a while to prepare this up. And here it is, a very convenient time when he actually is scheduled to go to Moscow, started right there and then. This is also a very well-known tactic. In 2016, or maybe it was 2015, I don't remember, don't hold me to the date, something very similar. I had a video about that was done in Macedonia, specifically when the president of Macedonia was in Moscow. Suddenly, a color revolution begins in the country, which was facilitated from across the border from Kosovo. There are Albanians living in Macedonia, and there are Albanians that were streaming through the very porous border from Kosovo into Macedonia. And the color revolution succeeded sufficiently that president had to resign. Okay, well, so this is a very well-known, it's by the book, by the CIA book. In this case, Duterte is a lot tougher, and he holds a lot more power, and he apparently has a lot more support in the country, which is good for him. Could be worse.
Yeah, well, we know how these coincidences go. It's just amazing. You know, the day before you're going to visit Moscow, wouldn't you know it? ISIS is around. Just one of those things. Well, we've covered all the points I really wanted to go into, and I think we've discussed your webinars a bit and so on. But I do think it would be good to, if there are any loose ends that you think are worth bringing up before we close it for today, what interests you? What have you been thinking about lately?
You know, there are so many things that go on. And as I said, I was busy with a lot of articles on Futurist Trendcast, my webinars, which are my first priority for this summer, 3 webinars. Then I plan a big event for the fall, which, Paul, I hope we can collaborate for that event. That will be for the centennial of the 1917 Russian Revolution. We'll discuss everything multidimensionally, third-dimensionally. I'll give all perspectives. I'll explain things that were never explained by by anybody, anywhere. Completely great event. And best thing is going to be free for everybody to participate. It's going to be a live webinar, and people will also be able to ask me questions. But they have to be subscribers to my blog. They have to follow me. That will be the condition. They have to follow me in all kinds of social media. And I hope that we can collaborate on that, because I think the event will be tremendous and very necessary. There are so many misconceptions. So this is on my mind, and I'm inviting all of your listeners to, again, check out Futures Trendcast and ladaray.com, these two places. Just go, those who don't know my sites, just go to Google Lada Ray or Futurist Trendcast, and everything should come up. My blog, my site, everything. So that was in my mind. Also, of course, I always monitor Ukraine and the situation in Russia extremely closely. I also monitor the situation in Eastern Europe very closely, including the Balkans. Balkans are very much on everybody's mind. What is happening in Serbia, Montenegro, and dragging Montenegro into NATO. How Serbia is trying to resist. Serbia is fledgling, but they're trying to resist the situation. And one thing I do want to bring up, because it is on my mind, and I literally don't have the time to bring it up on my blog for people. So I want to use this opportunity, if you don't mind, and say a few words about Moldova. Sure. What's happening in Moldova. This is very interesting. Moldova for years has been basically leaning, because of the politicians that were in power, towards EU. At some point, they were practically ready to be absorbed by Romania, stop being their own country, in order to actually somehow open the road to the EU. There are a lot of Romanian citizens in Moldova. Some estimates I hear, and of course Moldova is near and dear to my heart, as well as Prидnestrovia, which used to be a part of the Moldavian Socialist Republic during Soviet Union, but then broke away in 1992 because they didn't want to be a part of Romania. And at the time, Romanian nationalists were so strong that they were literally dragging Moldova into Romania. And the population in the Pridnestrovia area is very international. And if one assumes that there are Russians living there, it's like 30% Russians, 30% or 25% Ukrainians, 25% Russians, over 30% Moldavians is still the majority, as well as many others, Bulgarians, Turks, you name it. Gypsies, lots of different nationalities. And they unanimously voted to secede. And they also wanted to join Russia, but because they don't have any sort of border with Russia, it's practically impossible. So at this point, they basically, this little Pridnestrovia, which is very stretched and very narrow, it served as this thorn in the back of Moldova, where the population completely denied anything to do with Romania. And Russia had to keep peacekeepers there all these years in order to prevent Moldavia from attacking Pridnestrovia yet again and repeating the 1992 war. And that war in 1992 was basically instigated and facilitated by Romanians, by Romanian nationalists, took over literally Moldavian space, Moldavian politics, everything in Moldavia. We call it Moldavia in Russian, or Moldova, which is a newer name. It's the same thing. And ever since, Moldova was basically teetering on the brink, but something was not letting it to be absorbed, and a sufficient number of the population didn't allow it to be absorbed and to stop to exist by Romania. And literally 2-3 years ago, the huge shift started happening. Again, speaking of the earth shift. And the part of the population that was anti-absorption by Romania, and therefore anti-EU, not against relations with the EU, but against exclusive relations with the EU, because the way it was presented by those in power, and they are pro-EU, pro-Romania forces, was that you have to be fully in the EU and sever all relations with Russia. Does that sound familiar? That's exactly the same rake that Ukraine is stepping on right now. Sever all relations with Russia and full force to the EU, even if EU doesn't even want you anywhere close, even if EU treats you as slave labor. That's what Moldavians found out the hard way throughout all these years. And somehow, strangely enough, despite the fact that they tried to sever all relations with Russia for years, strangely enough, the majority of Moldavians still work as guest workers, migrant workers in Russia, not in the EU. A very strange aberration. So half of the country that is able-bodied, working age population, half of them works abroad. Then they send money back home, and that's how their families survive. Their families stay back, such as children, such as elderly. They send money back home, and that's how their families live. No economy of their own to speak of. They actually have very, very nice, decent agriculture, but they're destroying their agriculture by severing ties with Russia. And so the resurgency started very peacefully, very quietly several years ago. And recently, a new president was elected in Moldova. As I predicted, incidentally, in the past several years, those who followed my Moldavian posts and my Moldavian reports. And this president, Igor Dodon, is very openly pro-Russian, very openly anti-integration with the EU. And his party of the Socialists, has been winning elections into parliament. However, other parties would gang up on them with, incidentally, Nuland's participation. Nuland was very big. She would go to Romania and they would plot together how to keep Dodon and his people out of power. I covered all that in various reports. And so finally, Dodon gets elected, and he immediately went to Russia and started establishing very special relations with Russia. The way the president of the new country behaves, like, for example, what is the first visit the president of elect is making to what country? The first visit was to Russia. That demonstrates to the entire world what priorities are in Moldova. What priorities does this president have? And this president, he will have a huge fight, and it's going to be a tough and ongoing fight. Basically, he's like a Trump of Moldova. And this fight is this uneasy equilibrium is taking place in Moldova right now, when one side, the party that is pro-integration, pro-customs union with Russia and Eurasia, and another party that is pro-EU and forget any ties with Russia, and even for pro-absorption by Romania. So this is balancing. It's like another thing that we're seeing, observing in the world, very good demonstration of how the earth shift works, how uneasy equilibrium between the East and the West, the great balancer and the Western choice is happening. Moldova is a very, very visible, good illustration of that. And so Dodon went to Russia during St. Petersburg Economic Forum, that forum that made that big splash when Megyn Kelly was questioning Putin and he gave her a piece of his mind. A lot of people probably saw something, at least the interview Putin gave to Megyn Kelly, and she took out 13 minutes of Putin's speech. But RT said, "Oh, we have the whole speech. Here it is." So Dodon was also there, and he gave his own keynote address. And he said, point blank, he just went ahead and said it. You know, for years, ever since we've been independent in 1991, Moldova has been exploited by the West. We have been swindled. We have been duped. We have been lied to. we only suffered problems from our association with the EU, and we don't want to do it anymore. We see Russia as our friend. We don't want to be exclusively with Russia or with the EU. However, the US and the West tried to subvert Moldova more than once. There were color revolutions. They were pressuring and prosecuting people who had a difference of opinion. And he just went after the West and gave them this very public indictment through the podium of the International Forum in St. Petersburg. And huge applause. People literally ate it up. And incidentally, in that forum, in that St. Petersburg summit, there were so many people from the West. Well, Megyn Kelly, the host, was from the US. There were 300 business people from the US in the audience, the highest number ever. And all these people heard what President of Moldova said. It was never said, literally never before, by a dignitary of that stature said that openly and that in such a tough fashion. He did not mince any words. In 10 minutes, he just spelled it out. It was literally a proclamation of that, you know what, this is not going to work anymore. Very brave of him. And I wish him all the best, because the country is still teetering. It's like really balancing very uneasily. But I think he feels, first of all, strong enough. And I think he can do a lot of things. He also is the only man who can reunite Pridnestrovia with Moldova, because he really is proposing something Pridnestrovia wants, getting back in a very tight and close relationship with Russia, recreating customs union with Russia, eventually probably joining Eurasian Union. So this is something that Pridnestrovia is unable to achieve because it's an unrecognized republic. Together with Moldova, it can. And Dodon promises that this will be his mission while he's president, to reunite Pridnestrovia on terms that are good for Pridnestrovia. Loose confederation, federation, whatever they want. This might happen. Actually, I'm not against it, as long as he can clean up the house in Moldova, because it still is a terrible mess. They have one oligarch controlling the entire country. His name is Plahotniuk. Everybody in Moldova knows him. Everybody knows that he pulls all the strings. He is the richest by far, the only really oligarch, and the richest by far man there. He controls and buys up all the politicians. Of course, all his assets are in the West, and need I say more? Well, this is the story of Moldova. I really wanted to leave this information with everybody. I think this is very interesting and very telling. See, a while back, I was predicting what would happen with Ukraine in the time frame. And I said that Ukraine would be turning around between now and 2018 back towards Russia and away from the West. This is really not happening yet at all, seemingly. But people are already so tired of this regime that it's possible that when there are elections, there could be early elections in Ukraine in October, I believe, or something like that. And it's very possible that a new president might be elected that is a lot more reasonable. There is one man, remember this name, Medvedchuk. His name is Medvedchuk. And this guy, he is not pro-Russian by any means. He actually is, his father was anti-Russian, and or his ancestors, they were actually part of that Bandera Ukronacji OUN OPA during and right after World War II, and they fought against the Soviet Union. It is not an easy man or a simple man to deal with, but he still is a lot more reasonable. And he now calls for Ukraine to establish good relations with Russia. It is possible he might replace Poroshenko. Very possible, especially now that the US is withdrawing, slowly but surely withdrawing from Ukraine, kind of like decoupling from Ukraine and trying to extricate itself from this mess in Ukraine. Very, very possible. So it is actually possible that little Moldova will be pushing Ukraine in the right direction now that the Dawn came to power in Moldova. It's going to be very interesting to observe. I intend to continue monitoring the situation in Ukraine and Moldova very closely. These are places, as many of you know, that are close to me, where I spent parts of my childhood. I love Moldova, Pridnestrovia, have good memories. Of course, I love Ukraine, parts of Ukraine, Odessa primarily, and the Black Sea area where I grew up. And so I'll be talking a lot about it. Just visit my blog and my YouTube channel for that.
Okay, well, I think that's quite interesting. Well, why don't we call it a wrap now? I think we've got a lot for everyone to chew on and think about, from the Neptune to astrological, all kinds of things. And I too am going to have to listen to it again, because there are a lot of bits of wisdom in there that I think we want to think about. And I thank you very much for coming, and I hope our listeners get a chance to go over to check out your websites and your future webinars. So thanks again, and it's a wrap.